Hello, yeah, second one for today. A piece in the Telegraph by our good friend Michael Deacon. A couple of people I've met in the last week or so. I've sort of had conversations with them. They're sort of Tory voters, Boris fans, and I have said to them, do you really think that anyone else as Prime Minister would have done any worse than him? To which sometimes they sort of come out with this stuff about Jeremy Corbyn, and I think it's a kind of what is it? It's a position of absolute last resort, in the sense that you can project into the future that never happened. So Michael Deacon's done this, and it is one of those kind of typical kind of very Tory kind of sneering pieces. So I'm going to sort of skip over various bits of it, just sort of getting to the meat and bones of it. And it's incredibly disingenuous, simply because it manages to factually be quite wrong, and also because it really avoids all of those huge things that we know realistically that Corbyn wouldn't have done. So anyway, after a sort of preamble, wouldn't it be awful stuff? To quote, okay, take one unequivocal triumph of our COVID response: the rapid procurement of vaccines by Kate Bingham. Prime Minister Corbyn surely wouldn't even have appointed someone like her. Not only is the woman a dreaded venture capitalist, but even worse, she's married to a Tory, Jesse Norman MP. Yes. First of all, we don't know. Secondly, no, I don't think he would have appointed a Tory. And if he had appointed somebody, I think we can be pretty sure that Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't be involved in the sort of nepotism that has gone on in and around COVID, PPE, etc. contracts. And since we're sort of raising the idea of, wasn't our response brilliant? This is the government that basically didn't really want to involve the NHS in rolling out the vaccines. Do you remember that one? Yeah. Do you remember they just couldn't get it working properly because, you had all of that NHS capacity that they didn't want to lose because it meant that they didn't get to have contracts with their mates. And since we're talking about COVID, does anybody remember Track and Trace? How much did that cost again? Wasn't that given that to a wife of a dreaded venture capitalist, Tory MP, whatever? Would that have happened under Corbyn? I think we can be pretty darn sure it wouldn't be, because if there's one thing you can criticise the Labour Party for, it's they can organise a state response to things, can't they? Yeah. Anyway, he then sort of goes on about Big Pharma misgivings. Oh yes, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't trust Big Pharma. Therefore, such are his misgivings about Big Pharma. In 2019, he pledged that Labour would set up a rival state-run drugs manufacturer. How this would have turned out, I couldn't say. But I'm getting unhappy visions of a panicking Richard Burgon setting light to his lab coat with a Bunsen burner. Yes. Well, first of all, state-run drugs manufacturer, we've actually this government has handed over a large part of drugs manufacture in the UK to an Israeli company, because, we have to have those post-Brexit trade deals, don't we, because we panic about that. Anyway, Richard Burgon, as I believe, was the shadow, what was he? He was the shadow Secretary of Justice. So I don't really know what he would be doing with it. So, yeah, let's move on, shall we? Just ignore the rest of that. I only ask, about Big Pharma. I only ask because Corbyn has, in the past, expressed support for homeopathy. Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to produce vaccines in an epidemic, does it? Anyway, moving on. Of course, I'd very much like to think that, as PM, Corbyn would not have suggested treating COVID patients with an elixir of witch hazel wolfbane whilst placing quartz crystals over their chakras in order to cleanse their aura of bad energy. As he didn't become PM, however, I suppose I'll never know. No, but I think we can guess that he wouldn't. I think this is actually... sometimes when I read stuff like this, it takes a while for the penny to drop with me that this is actually supposed to be funny. Good. Yes, anyway, let's move on. But even if Corbyn had been happy to hire a Tory marrying venture capitalist to procure a scientifically proven vaccine from greedy Americans, he would still have faced one more difficulty: how to promote the vaccine. To inspire confidence, he would need to assure the public he'd had the jab himself. Indeed, that would be a sensible thing to do, wouldn't it, if you were Prime Minister? For Corbyn, this might have been a problem because he thinks it's none of the public's business. Now, he's going to criticise Corbyn for something that he said when he wasn't Prime Minister or indeed a Labour MP. But hang on for this. So, in other words, we need a government that's going to insist on people having vaccines, and that things like knowing about the vaccine would be very important, like maybe a vaccine passport, one might say. I mean, you'd never get the Conservative Party worrying about such things. In June, during an interview with LBC, he was asked if he'd been vaccinated. He refused to answer. Everybody, he said, should, quotes, take advantage of the vaccine rollout, quotes, if they wish to, but he wouldn't confirm whether he'd done so himself. Some years ago, he sniffed, I took a vow I would not discuss my personal health with anybody. A perfectly reasonable statement to make. If you're a normal member of the public, coming from a PM during a pandemic, however, it would have been less than ideal. Yes, it wouldn't it? Yeah, if he'd said that, if he'd been Prime Minister in this alternate future of yours, yes. However, at that time, he wasn't leader of the Labour Party, or indeed a Labour MP, which he still isn't. I mean, he's as close to an ordinary member of the public, realistically, as you can get for somebody that actually does sit in the House of Commons. Doesn't he? Isn't he, Michael? And if you think about Boris Johnson and some of the stuff that he's done recently, do you remember those rules that he's introduced, like wearing masks when you go to a hospital, not having parties? In Corbyn's defence, I was about to say that on his watch there would surely been no scandals about lockdown busting parties at Number 10. But then I remembered last year Mr Corbyn apologised after a photo was published of him attending a dinner party that broke the rule of 6. So even there we can't be sure. And that much is very true. I do hand that one to him, yes. It is very thin gruel, though, isn't it? So that one compared to our current government. Yes, anyway, as I was thinking about the Sean Bailey piece I put earlier, please do put out something like this on the day of the Shropshire by-election, when people in a traditional Tory seat, who no doubt will be reading the Daily Telegraph, will be reading this stuff, and no doubt will think to themselves, I wonder if we could have a different government, how things would have been different. This is good. This is good. I'm looking forward to the result tonight. I think it'll really be a vindication of our current government. Well done, Michael. Well done.